right, once again, I'm going to start talking, even though my progress wheel is still spinning. Anybody from me will ever hears wind of this? Bad function on your app. Like your camera, this function is very counterintuitive. Okay, this is the little message to the makers of the Mevo camera. Before I go to the next layer, which is going to be dark, transparent details, let me do this dance thing again for you really quickly. Again, this is review for you old timers. The dance of painting. This is an analogy, of course. Word picture. There are three couplets, three steps. Large versus small. All right. Large versus small. Light versus dark. And literal versus expressive, artsy, loose. I'll call it loose. Okay? So those are the three couplets. That is to say, if your last layer was large and dark, then it's a good candidate that your next layer should be light and small. Or if your last layer was literal and small, your next layer might be large and loose, and so on. So in other words, you don't keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. That would be a bad dance. It'd be like jumping up and down. You want to do all six of these, but these are in three couplets. Now, the music to this dance, if you will, again, speaking in analogy, is the whole time while you are painting in these three couplets, large, small, light, dark, literal, loose, you're using the music layers that is transparent, translucent, and I'm assuming that if your English is your first language, if you just think about it for half a moment, you know the difference between these two, and opaque. Okay, okay? Now, most of the layers are transparent. The key, the magic layers are translucent, and the fewest layers, the light colors, are always opaque. Light and opaque, dark and transparent. Okay, so if that's a fair description of, in my opinion, a good painting process, then where do we go from here? So the last thing I did was this white stuff, light and detailed. So my next dance step could be dark and large, but 2 steps ago was large and dark. 2 steps, large and dark, then light and detailed. So my next thing, of course, it's not you don't have to be slave to this, but it just gives you a good idea. I'm going to do dark details. Again, still working in transparent acrylic. And let me show you again, for those of you who just tuned in lately. Here is the image that I'm working from, a photograph that I took in Beaufort, North Carolina, on a day when there was not a hurricane coming in. And so I'm looking now I'm still really basically looking at values in this subject matter. And I'm painting things that are dark. Now, I'm doing dark purple. Here's why. That opens me up. I need to talk about a whole category of thinking while I'm painting. Okay, so I'm looking mostly at things that are dark, especially like areas, not tiny details, but areas of the photograph that are dark. And I'm doing it in purple, which again gives me a good excuse to bring you up to date. If my approach to painting is different for you, as it is, of course, different from almost everybody, the way everybody else paints. So let me explain some of the idiosyncrasies of painting in transparent colors. Some of the rules are different in the world of transparency than they are in the world of opaque color mixing. And here's one. in the world of transparent painting, dark, gray is our darkest color. Let me repeat that. In the transparent world, did I say that? Purple. I'm not sure I said it right yet. In the world of transparent painting, purple is our darkest color. So that's why I'm using purple right now. Not because, again, let me show you the image. Not because I imagine this having a strong purple color when I'm finished. But I'm far from finished. I just want this black virtually here. So purple is the darkest. Let me give you some of the other idiosyncrasies, things that are different about transparent colors that you wouldn't necessarily pick up on without a bunch of experimentation on your own. So let me give you a couple others. Here's another one. In the world of transparent colors, there's no such thing as red. Red is not a transparent color. If you take the color red, fire engine red, cad red, naphthol crimson, scarlet lake, Chinese red, vermilion, if you take one of those reds, fire engine red, and make it transparent, you end up with a rather sickly bubblegum pink. It doesn't emotionally, intuitively, even feel like red anymore. Does that make sense? It doesn't look like red. It looks like pink. So in order to get redness, if I can use that, again, inventing words, sort of, in order to get something red in the transparent world, you switch to, in the 4-color printing process world, it's magenta. In the oil painters or acrylic painters world, quinacridone, although I must admit that last Sunday I was teaching a class, and one of my students had a color that was labeled quinacridone, and I looked at the pigments on the back, and sure enough, it was quinacridone, but it was the ugliest, reddest, it was a fire engine red labeled quinacridone. So watch out for that. Evidently not all. Most quinacridones are quite magenta. Magenta means it's purple-ish, purple-pinkish, a purplish pinkish red. Magenta, no, I hadn't finished my list. So most quinacridones, magenta. There's another name I'm looking for. Never mind, I'll come back to it. Permanent rose is my favorite transparent red. It's very pinkish purplish, very cool, a very cool red, and one of my favorite, probably my favorite cool red. And that is, in fact, what you're looking for in the transparent world. It has to be a cool red. Then, if you want to paint something fire engine red in the transparent world, you behave just like 4-color printing process. You do magenta first and then yellow on top of it. And when you get those ratios right, you'll have a beautiful fire engine red. But you don't do it in the transparent world, you do magenta or quinacridone, or sometimes an alizarin crimson will work. Some people, that's their go-to color for their cool red. I don't like it. It's not quite as red, not quite as punchy as I like. I like the permanent rose is my favorite, but I like many magentas. Okay, so those are two things that are different about transparent. What else can I give you? Oh, yellows in the transparent world. When yellows are put on your canvas, they become noticeably cooler than if you were to mix them, say, with titanium white and paint them. In other words, this yellow, this orange right here, if I were to spread it thin across my canvas, it would become quite yellow. Whereas this, this is quite a fairly warm yellow, but if I spread this, like I did, you can still see here, across my canvas, it becomes a very, very chilly, cold yellow. So yellows get cooler when you spread them on top of white. And again, that makes logical sense right there. It's like, oh, if you put it on top of white, it gets cooler. Yep, it does. That's all that comes to mind at the moment for the idiosyncrasies of, I'm forgetting a bunch. They'll come back to me later. I don't need to give them all to you right at this minute. But there are several things that are different about working in transparent color versus the traditional opaque color mixing on your palette approach. I learned a lot of this 35 years ago, 30 years ago, from when I made Maxfield Parrish sort of my guru, my muse, the guy that I was pursuing for a number of years as an illustrator. Maxfield Parrish was just Google him. All of his paintings were done in transparent colors. And when I read his techniques, started practicing, that's when I really, really began to learn the magic of transparency. Before that, I painted very traditional. And even after that, I continued. When I came back to oils, I tended to paint in a very traditional manner. It wasn't until 15 years ago, I was about 50 years old, 2004, that I made this huge switch to the weird way that I paint now. There was a reason for it. It was a journey, of course. I used to paint very traditional, very opaque, like everybody else. And I still do sometimes just for fun. But not so much. Okay, now I'm going to thin this purple down quite a bit and do some mid-tone, medium values up here. So now I'm looking at my photograph and looking for parts of the photograph, this subject matter, that are medium dark. I started out by doing dark stuff. Now I'm looking for not quite so dark. And by the way, look at, you can see still this very first stroke that I put on the camera, second stroke of blue and then yellow, right there, coming through that purple. That is getting gorgeous. Now it's beginning, and likewise in here, there was a yellow streak that went down like this. Do you see that? A lot of it is covered up now by the white, but there's still a whole bunch of yellow peeking through here. That's becoming magical. That's why I do that. That's why I do those random color strokes, colored streaks through the middle of the painting in the early stages of my painting process. This is a field of weeds. A little bit unusual here for me to do this entire layer in one color, all purple so far. A little bit unusual. Usually I'm inclined to mix it up a little bit. So probably what I'm going to do here in a minute is switch to another color. Oh, it's just a forest, a virtual forest of lines. I'll show you the photograph again real quickly. See all those lines up here? Of course I'm not going to try to render those one for one. That would be absurd in my opinion. In my world of painting, that would be absurd. Okay, I'm going to shift around just slightly. I'm picking up some, without cleaning my brushes, I'm going to pick up some ultramarine here. So same thing, I'm still doing things that are dark, not quite so dark now. Slightly dark, and just shifting the color. Let me grab a small brush real quickly. Do some blending, which I don't usually do. It's unusual because I want the bow of the ship, the hull of the ship, to look like, of course, like it's rounded. A little while ago, I was talking about when I was doing the white. I was saying, remember, you're not painting things that are white And that when I was doing white paint, I'm painting things that are light because I'm going to come back later and do colors on top. So that's exactly what I'm doing right here, right now. I'm doing, in this case, it's a white boat, but I'm doing the shady side of a white boat. So it's mostly blue. Got it? Same thing up here. Pretty subtle purplish blue. There we go. There's this big, I have no idea, there's this big white monolith, big white box sitting out here in the grass, in the weeds. Yeah, I have no idea what it is, but I like it. I especially like it for the reflection it creates down here in the water. So I'm certainly going to keep it in the yeah, let's continue this trend. So now I'm actually picking up, going further away from the purple. Now I've picked up phthalo blue on my brushes. I mentioned earlier that one of the big dangers of putting lines on your painting, any kind of lines, with paint or with pencils, is that then you're gravely tempted to, quote, color in the lines. And you want to be very careful so that, you see me being careful not to be too careful, as I call it. Be careful not to be too careful. I like this. Let me go ahead and do some sky, because I want the sky up here actually to be a mid-tone, not a light. And in that regard, my photograph is of very little help to me, because the photograph is a typical bad blown out sky. Blown out in photography means it went all the way to white because it was so light. But I'm going to correct that. Of course, I'm not going to make you all know that, right? Most of your photographs are just as bad as mine. Forgive me while I insult us all together here. And your skies, more often than not, unless you're professional and really know what you're doing, your skies are blown out. That is white or virtually white. That's camera. That's bad photography. Don't make your painting. Don't make the sky white just because it's white in the photograph. It shouldn't be white. If you're a professional photographer, you'd know how to make your sky not white. So don't copy a bad photograph. Make your sky whatever, blue, something attractive. Am I ranting and raving enough for you today? All the people who got tired of my ranting and raving have long since left me. This guy rants and raves too much. Okay. Can you remember how my painting looked just a few minutes ago before I started this layer? It looks a whole lot more realistic right now than it did just a little while ago. In fact, I started up here in this big dark area, and I'm guessing that it's mostly dry. The purple is dry, so I can come back now with a phthalo blue and take it to the next step. In the final painting, this area up here is virtually black, but I don't want it ugly black. I want it black with a whole bunch of interesting, like it is becoming right now, with a whole bunch of interesting subtle colors in it. That's one of the things I like best about my particular approach to painting, is that my darks and my midtones are very interesting because they're built up from layers of transparent color. Okay, this is starting to look like a painting. I'm kind of getting happy about it, happy about the composition, happy about the way it's feeling now. Let me do a little bit more phthalo up here on the side of this barn. I don't know what they call it. Dry dock, shed, who knows? Okay, I think I'm going to do one more thing before we leave this layer. Same brushes, rinse them off a little bit. I'm going to pick up my magenta, sometimes called a primary red. That's one of the words I was looking for. Sometimes primary red, magenta, and I'm going to do this big, a real significant part of this boat, of this scene, is the red waterline on this boat, and you can see how careful I am being to color outside the lines. Take a little rag. There we go. Painting with a rag, not erasing, painting with a rag. You'll see how the red is, I've made it escape out of its boundaries. Very much on purpose. Now, up here, there's a lot of interesting red stuff happening up here because, whoops, is that too much? It might be. Because of all the rust that's on the metal boat. Lots of little highlights of red here and there. I'm going to diminish this just a tiny bit. There we go. Now, yes, I want some of this over here. Likewise. This is what I'm doing right now. It's one of the hardest things evidently for my students to get a hold of. For instance, I just painted this roof. Are you with me? I just painted this roof right here, but my brush strokes went all the way up to there, down here, down there, down there, while I was painting, quote unquote, painting this roof. Yeah, that is what I want you to do. That is what I want you guys to do. When you paint the thing, it goes, oh, crazy, outside the object. There's several reasons for that, and I've given this speech so many times, I don't know if I want to give it yet again one more time. We like to see bits of the object that have escaped into the background, and bits the color from the object escaped into the background, and color from the background escaped into the object. So one of the easiest ways to accomplish that is simply to color very, very messy. And I will say that in a class, and I'll come by and somebody will have painted outside the lines like 1/4 of an inch. Let me make clear. Right here, I went outside the lines 3.5 inches outside the lines. Okay? Now, I just stumbled on this just this last second. What I'm doing next, before I leave this layer, I'm going to go ahead and do some warm tones. So I started out with the darkest stuff, this stuff here. I've come all the way, getting lighter and lighter and lighter now, to now I'm painting the color of sunshine on everything that's light. Isn't that pretty? I just love transparent color. Just love transparent color. Messy, messy, messy. Let me do a little bit on the shady side of this boat, because there's an awful lot of light bouncing back from the environment to make this side of the boat warm. I put blue on there very much on purpose, but now I'm putting yet orange on top of the blue very much on purpose. Make sense? Same thing up here. Gonna warm up this side of the barn. There we go. if we do a good job in the underpainting stage, we'll have very little color correction to do in the final edit oil painting stage. Go ahead also, since I'm here, actually pick up, I don't use brown very often in my underpainting, but I'm picking up a little bit of brown right here just to push that purple, to dull that back, but it's still coming, purple still coming through, still beautiful, but just not as strong as it was just a few minutes ago. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break right there. When I come back, I will be doing white highlights again, and then probably moving